Nothing's going to change my world. I did think about it while you were singing that, that right after that we should sing the song, Everything is Changing. Right? Because that is the paradox. That is the paradox. And when we are living in the spiritual truth of who we are, and when we're doing our spiritual work, we are living from that place where nothing is going to change my world, because I know who I am, and I know that life is beautiful and joy and filled with love, and that's what I see and expect. And when we are savoring our life and experiencing all that life has to offer, everything is changing. And we have waves of experiences, joy and sorrow, and waves of activity and rest, and all of this constant, ceaseless motion. And both of these things are simultaneously true, which just makes my brain hurt. Oh, gosh, how is that even possible, right? I remember when I first got into the science of mind, I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do, and I would just do it. Could you just tell me what it is? Then I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to have Spirit tell me what to do. And the law was like, well, could you just make up your mind? Pick something? And I was like, okay, that doesn't really work. And it was annoying not to have this like clear, laid out path, until I realized that everything in metaphysics and in the science of mind, everything resolves itself in the paradox. We do ourselves a disservice when we underestimate the power of our ability to intellectually understand this and emotionally experience it. I think that I've seen in the last 40 years in the science of mind a little bit of an anti-intellectualism and a desire to simply feel the feeling of presence without doing the hard work of embracing the paradox. And to embrace the paradox, we have to spend time on the both and discover that we are complex enough beings, that we are actually capable of holding a paradox, not only in our minds, but in our hearts. And it takes work. It does. It takes work. It takes the opportunity to explore both sides of the paradox, and then to begin to work to find metaphors, symbols, moments in life, nature, our own experiences that help us see how these two things are simultaneously true, and how they are forever cyclically moving in the rhythm of life. So as we continue to explore this being and doing, do, we are really looking today at this rhythm of paradox. For those of you who get the Science of Mind magazine, I have an article in the October issue that is on this very subject. And they're now doing the 2 months together, so it's in the September-October issue. And if you're not getting the Science of Mind, you can always subscribe to it. So we're gonna put on our ability to think about things today. And we're going to invite ourselves, as we think about things, to feel how we think about it. Right? Because again, that's the paradox. Thinking is not divorced from feeling. Thinking is not divorced from the sensations that we have in our bodies when we think about something. And what we think and how we feel about it and how we feel it in our bodies, all of that together is the information that we need to begin to grasp a deeper reality and a deeper understanding. And each and every one of us are capable of this, because each and every one of us are made in the image and likeness of the divine presence and the divine intelligence. And it will make your brain hurt. Because you can't just use your brain, right? You can't just use your brain to think, feel, imagine, and experience these paradoxes. Yeah. So, let us begin. So, one of the best ways that we can explore our paradoxes in the science of mind is through our science of mind teaching symbol. And for those of you who are relatively new, we have it up here, we have it up on our monument wall, you see it in a lot of different places. Our teaching symbol is not a symbol of God. It's not neither something that we worship or in any way, shape, or form take as a sacred object. It is a teaching symbol, and it helps us to remind ourselves of the wholeness of the nature of reality. And we use it to confront these more complex ideas and explore them in a way that helps us make sense of them and play with these paradoxes. So we are going to use this science of mind teaching symbol today. For those of you who are familiar with the science of mind, the book that we use, there's a whole set of these charts right before the glossary in the Science of Mind book. And they are fascinating to spend some time with, especially if your brain happens to think that way. It can be very helpful. So we're going to start with this very traditional representation of our teaching symbol. And for those of you who have taken classes, you're familiar with it. If you haven't taken classes, I highly, highly recommend and encourage you to do that, because our classes not only help you apply, but we actually have to understand what we're applying so that our application works, especially when it's a little more challenging. And we spend some time on this teaching symbol, not because you have to memorize the teaching symbol, for God's sakes, but simply so that we can really sort through in our own minds, what do we mean by the words we use? Too often we come into the science of mind, or we come into metaphysics from either some religious background or no religious background at all, and only a cultural understanding of words. And just changing the word of something, the name of something, isn't enough. We actually have to change the way we understand it and the images that we have about it and the way that we feel and sense what that word means. It's not enough just to change the word. So just changing the word God to spirit does not mean that we don't have an anthropomorphized idea that there's something out there that has a plan for our life. Right? It's not enough to change the word God to spirit, or Jesus to spirit, or Allah to spirit, right? We have to actually reconstruct a different idea about the nature of reality as a whole, which allows us a much more comprehensive spirituality and really values the fact that you are a complex being. You are way more than you think you are. And all the stories that you tell yourself about what you can't understand or can't do or can't know are nonsense. Because there is that within you that already does know, because it already is that. And so by forcing ourselves to contemplate it, we begin pushing up against that which already knows. And we start pushing through the false belief that says, I don't know, I can't understand, or I'll never get it. All right, so here's our teaching symbol. And so we remember that the circle represents that the oneness. Now, you can also put the word God out there around the circle, only if you remember that God is not the God of our childhood. So I like to use the word one. Everything is part of the one. And of course, the circle itself is a misnomer because there's no outside, right? Okay, that makes your brain hurt right off the bat. How far can you extend that circle? And just imagine that that circle just keeps going in every direction and never ends. Right, I know, the brain just goes, what? So we use that as the symbol that everything that we talk about, everything, every non-thing, everything that we can see, imagine, taste, touch, feel, everything that we can talk about that has no tangibility, anything that we can describe or experience in the mystical experience, all of it is part of the one. It's the one being all of it. This is the nature of reality, this totality. So we have to, we could just talk about the one. So the one is one, and what it does is it ones, and then by oneing, it ones, and it's a one and a one, right? Would any of that make sense? Not really, unless you make it into poetry and sing it, okay? Maybe we would have a feeling for it. So that doesn't quite work. So just because we give language to the one does not mean we're splitting it up, doesn't mean we're being dualistic, and it doesn't mean that we can't understand it. We may not grasp it in its fullness, but we can begin to make sense of it for ourselves in a way that helps us embrace this nature of this large reality that we are actually one with and a part of. So we understand that the one has two aspects to its being. The first is the absolute, unformed, and intangible aspect of its being. What does that mean? So this is what we might popularly call the source of life, the impulse of life. This is the causal reality. And what you'll notice is that it's unformed. In Hinduism, it's the no thing, the ultimate void from which all things come. It is the potential without the potential being actualized. Does that make sense? And it is absolute, which means there is no opposite. So there is, in fact, love as an absolute potential without something that we would think of as its opposite. And in the Christian tradition and in the ancient Celtic and Egyptian traditions that many of us are familiar with, this is represented by the vertical axis of the cross. Absolute, meaning it's absolute love in its totality, absolute peace, absolute beauty, absolute harmony. So that means that it's the potential of that being expressed in as many ways as we can possibly imagine it without opposition. So the first thing we notice here is that we do not understand in the one, in the nature of reality, that light and dark are contending with each other. In the absolute, there isn't love and anti-love having an argument or a fight over who's going to win. There is only the absolute presence. But it's unformed. It has not yet become anything. And it's completely intangible. So today, the closest we come to this is the quantum field. Haven't quite completely figured out what the quantum field is, but it's the wave part of the wave particle, right? That is the building block. And when a particle is a wave and not a particle, it isn't anything until it's a particle. But the oneness of it is that it's a wave particle. So when it's in its waveness and it is unformed, then it's like beingness that hasn't yet become anything, which is the particle part. Have I lost you yet? Yes, right? So do you see? We find something physical, tangible, that helps us kind of peer out of the corner of our eye. What in the world is she talking about? That's what I do when I read these books, and I think, okay, I'm going to just look at it out of the corner of my eye. If I stare at it too intently, it makes my head explode. But if I look at it out of the corner of my eye, I can sort of go, oh, okay. It's like a photon of light. Do you know that they don't actually know what light is? They don't actually know. It's a photon of light. A photon of light is a packet of information. What? A packet of information isn't actually anything. It's nothing. It's a no thing. Nothing. There's nothing there. But without light, we can't see. Well, clearly it's there. Not sure about that. Absolute, unformed, intangible. We're walking around in it all the time. And if you have ever had the experience in meditation or in a deeply centered space where you've seen the rain of white, you are seeing the potential that is beginning to come into existence. Hence the matrix. Well, the unformed is unformed. So it's nothing. Well, now we're bored. It's just ising, and potentially being potential. So that's just not enough. So the other half of the one is the relative, the formed, the tangible. So anything that we can point to, from a point, a dot, to the galaxies, to the universe as a whole, is the tangible, formed aspect of the one. Not separate from, not, oh, I'm the one over here and I think I'll go make you over there tangible. No. Right? Just as we can say, wait, I have a mind. Do you know they still don't know where your mind lives? Big, huge conversation. Is the brain the organ of the mind, or is the mind the ghost in the machine that is the product of the synapses firing? They still don't know the answer to that question because it's intangible and unformed, and they can't figure out where it lives. So, the one has both this intangible, unformed, absolute reality and the formed, tangible reality, which is not absolute, it's relative. And what does that mean? Relative means that it has the pairs of opposites. In Hinduism, they talk about the pairs of opposites as part of the fabric of the physical universe. The moment, the unformed, potential, intangible, absolute reality, the moment that it becomes form, it is in that moment relative to what it's not. So it either became the piano or it's the space around the piano. So it's either there or it's not. So everything here is relative to something else. So think about that, right? You have to go to the absolute, unformed, intangible reality, and you ask yourself, where is up? It's a silly question because there's no down. There's only ising, potential, because there's no thing, nothing. Only here. Up and down, hot and cold, left and right, pairs of opposites. Mostly, when we think about the absolute, and we think about the qualities of love and joy and peace and harmony, what we have is the pairs of opposites, not love and hate. We have the pair of opposites, which is the potential fully present or fully absent. We call the absent part, we call it something as if it were a thing of itself, love, hate, when in fact, it is simply the absence of love. And we have shades of all of that. right? Love and like and neutral and not so sure and what? And oh no, I am not having anything to do with you. I withdraw myself from you in every possible way, right? And we call that hate or even attack you. But the fundamental pair of opposites is whether the potential, the unformed reality as it comes into form, how much of that is present and how much of it is absent. And those two things are related to each other, which is why it's called the relative. Conditions of the human experience are always relative. What does that mean? They're not absolute. Poverty is not an absolute condition. It is relative to how much money you have and how much food you need, and how much money other people have, and how much food they have. But it's not an absolute condition. It's the absence of the abundance of the universe. Do you see? This is one of the most fundamental pairs of opposites. And when we're doing our spiritual work, when we're doing our spiritual mind treatment and our affirmations, and we're doing our work with our spiritual coaches, and we're seeking to live a spiritually based life, we want to be moving from the absolute. We want to be working in the unformed potential and drawing that into form with our declaration, recognizing that when we do so, that is not related to anything else. So the amount of abundance that I have is not related to my current experience of abundance or poverty, because I do the work in the absolute. Do you see? What we don't do is walk around in the relative world with the people that we love and care about and treat them from that absolute place. Well, like, what's the matter with you? Why are you experiencing an absence of abundance? Right? Because we're in the human condition right now, and we're actually related to each other. And compassion and empathy and all of those things are hugely important because they are the tangible form of love that we can express. But when we're doing our spiritual work about ourselves and someone else, what we do is we see the absolute truth as manifesting in their life. So we're playing on the continuum of absolute and relative. And we ourselves are moving between those two. Why? Because we live on both. I think of the presence as light. We can think of it as the quantum field, this absolute reality. We used these pictures last week. And then it comes into form, right? This is the tangible formed reality. And it is, in fact, an expression of the absolute. And it takes a million infinite number of forms to express the infinite possibilities, the infinite potential of the absolute. These two things are simultaneously true. And we live on only one side or the other of this paradox. When we live on one side or the other, we miss half of the oneness. So, this means that the absolute is eternal, infinite, and changeless. Nothing will change in my world. Right? Because that one, that shining one, is in fact the impulse of creation. And this is always changing, cyclical, and it's finite. And so we are constantly dealing with this paradox. This paradox is often really frustrating when we're talking about financial things, or we're talking about, it's been a conversation for years in Science of Mind when we're talking about the climate crisis and fossil fuels. Well, if everything is unlimited and we live in an abundant universe, there's obviously enough fossil fuel for forever. Except that fossil fuels are in the changing finite world. Now, what's not limited is energy. The potential for energy is unlimited. It is infinite, changeless, and eternal. But the minute it comes into form, whatever kinds of ways in which energy can come into form, the moment that it's formed, it has finitude as a part of its reality. And solar energy has finitude based on the solar panels, or the fact that in 5 billion years, the sun will eventually burn out. Now, 5 billion years to us, feels like infinite, right? But in the ultimate scheme of infinitude, that is not infinite. That's 5 billion years. You could actually give a number to it. If you can give a number to it, it's finite. So we're constantly playing on these two fields at the same time. And we often misapply infinitude to our conditions, and we apply conditions to the work that we're doing in the infinite reality of the absolute. This is a brilliant work that you can do both in classes and you can do with your spiritual coach. When you can get conditions, relativity, finiteness out of your spiritual mind treatment, and work from that absolute, infinite, eternal space, that changeless reality, and continually demand that it shows up unrelated to the experience that you're currently having. Do you see you're forcing change? Because this, down here, this physical creation is designed to change, and you're giving it new direction. But if you take that finiteness into your spiritual mind treatment or your spiritual work, and you say, because there's only so much good that I can imagine, that's the amount of good that I can have, do you see you've put condition, relativity, finitude in your spiritual work? These two things are happening at the same time. And it's work to know what's called for when, right? Which is why we have spiritual coaches and classes and community members and online things where we can work our way through this. And do you see, it's what we don't want to, we also don't want to see that it's, one of my favorite symbols in the world is the infinity symbol, because to me the infinity symbol is the dance of the paradoxes, right? Absolute, relative, unformed, formed, infinite, finite, unconditioned into something I'm putting a form to, right? And so this is part of the beauty of that infinity symbol, and it's the dance. And the rhythm of the paradoxes is the facileness and the agility we have to move between the two and to call them in, right? So we call this absolute truth in when we are really working with changing our life. Rather than manipulating the shell game down here, what really makes it change is when we change how it's moving into the world. And then when we're down here in the creation, let's enjoy it. Love it. Express, experience, be in it. Because this too is part of the one. Right? So we have the one, the absolute, unformed, infinite reality, and it's constantly coming into form, specifics. And they're changing, they come and go, right? And if you're ever like me and you think, my life is good, it's good, my work and relationship, we talked about that last week, right? Don't change anything. Okay, and then the kids grow up or they become teenagers, right? Or the boss moves away, or your favorite person that you work with that work, or you decide you just don't want to work there anymore, or you move, right? It's inevitable. It's inevitable that form changes, no matter how long it lasts. So what we want to do is participate in the changing nature of it, give it a little direction, be a part of it, but also to enjoy that and not cling so tightly because it is the nature of this to change. And then we don't have to be afraid because we know it's going to change. But there is that which is unchanging that we are forever drawing into the changing reality. Do you see? We're playing on both of them. So, this one, we can really work with this idea that it's this unformed reality is universal, right? It's everywhere present. It is the causal impulse of life itself, and it is individualized as us. Notice that the individualized as us is not in the formed part of it. Do not make the mistake of thinking that your humanness is the individualized expression of the one. No, it is the essential spirit as you that is the individualized expression of the one. It is the universe showing up as individualized as your essential reality and essential nature. Spirit as you, right? There's no gap. There's no gap between you and spirit. There's the universal sense of the oneness of the absolute reality, and there is the individualized experience of absolute reality. And then here we have creation and expression and experience. We call this, when you read the Science of Mind, the human condition. Right? Our experience of all of that, our personalities, our histories, our childhood, our traumas, the ways in which we express ourselves. Are we an accountant? Do we like art? Whatever, right? All of that is the way it comes into form as us. And how we are related to our history and our life and our past and our present and our future and what we want or what we think we want, all of that. So do you see that? Again, we are a paradox. We are a paradox. The universal individualized, which then comes into form, this and this, the brain, the personality, the ego, the body, the world of affairs, and but we're not just human. So for me, the ultimate paradox is this: I don't think we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I think we're spirit human. The ultimate paradox is that we're spirit human. And when we live from our humanness and look at spirit as if it was something out there, we are looking the wrong direction. And that's what builds the sense of separation. When we recognize ourselves as individualized expressions of the one that are human in form, that the humanness of us is finite, it is formed, it is in relationship to life, relative to all of the experiences. And this is simultaneously true. And our question is always, to me, what's my come from place? When I'm doing my spiritual work, I'm coming from my spiritual reality. When I'm finger painting with my granddaughter, I'm coming from my humanness. When I'm experiencing the mystical experience of being so much larger than this finiteness, I'm coming from the spiritual truth of my being. And when I'm sitting, seeing a sunset, walking on a trail in the mountains, having a cup of coffee in Europe, I'm savoring my humanness. Do you see? Simultaneously true. This is why there's no gap. We don't have to be in relationship with spirit. We don't have to become a part of spirit. We don't even have to be more spirit than we are now. This is who we are. All the time. This is the deepest paradox I know. It's the most profound opportunity that we have to become who we really are. And then we have that which is across the universe, connected to everything, and that which is right here, right now, giving the gift of being fully present. That's the dance. And this dance, we can find the rhythm. We can find our own personal rhythm with this. Some people love to spend hours in meditation, in the mystical experience, in the oneness at that absolute level. Other people are out there, they are making it happen in the world, and that's where they feel connected. That's where the juice is, right? The Hindus are brilliant in so many ways. They have 4 particular paths, 4 different ways in which they look at the paths of enlightenment. They call it the paths of yoga. So there's Raja Yoga, which is the royal road to meditation. It is the being drawn to sit in that absolute as much as possible. There's Bhakti Yoga, which is being in love with that representation of the unformed in the form. Well, loving gurus, loving Jesus, loving Allah, loving nature itself. Bhakti Yoga, deep devotion. There's Karma Yoga, which is Mother Teresa. My expression of the absolute is to be the eyes and hands and voice of the world, and to be that blessing. And that's where I am in the rhythm of spirit as me doing the work. And Jnana Yoga, which is the path of the intellect, which we have been on today. To open and expand our consciousness into the possibility that we can sense and feel and understand and therefore know something about this truth, that we may embrace it and play our own rhythm with these paradoxes. Don't be afraid. You're more than you know.